Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, my dear students. Our current session is on what are speech communities. I hope and expect by the end of this session you would be able to understand the term speech communities and the ambiguities and confusion related to the term. Well, my dear students, language is both an individual possession and a social possession. What I mean by that is that each individual uses language and his or her language may differ or vary from the other individual. But language is not restricted to individual choices only. It has a lot of impact of the society and the culture. And language is a social possession, which means every social group, community, society, culture, or ethnicity may have their own language. When it comes to the question of speech community, we would therefore expect that certain individuals would linguistically behave in a certain way like other individuals behave, which means whatsoever is the number of people in the world, it is not possible that each individual would have his or her own language. There has to be certain smaller and bigger clusters or groups where, within those clusters or within those groups, the language is a shared possession and all the individuals in that group in certain ways share the characteristics of the language that they use. What does this mean? It means certain things. For example, they might be said to speak the same language or the same dialect or the same variety, to employ, for example, the same code, and in that respect, to be the members of that speech community. So, this is a very loosely constructed definition of the term speech community, that people who speak the same language or the dialect or same variety that means to employ a certain code, be it in the form of a dialect or language, they can be called the members of a speech community. In fact, my dear students, the term is derived from the German term. If you look at the screen, you can see this term here. It is difficult to pronounce. It's a long term, but the term speech community is derived from this. Here I am giving a specific definition of speech community. So on the slide you can see another definition. A speech community is a group of people who share a set of linguistic norms and expectations. Here what is important, my dear students, is sharing the linguistic norms plus not only the language but also expectations related to that language, to how their language should be used. In fact, when we look at the literature relevant to linguistics and sociolinguistics, we find a lot of confusion and ambiguity related to the term speech community. It is debated much, and still we cannot say that there is a final definition. The definitions of the term speech community have evolved over the times, and they tend to involve varying degrees of emphasis on different aspects of it. For example, some definition would focus more on the shared community membership. There may be another definition that would focus more on the shared linguistic communication. So if you notice the difference, the community membership is important. The users, this speech community definition deals with the term with reference to community membership. On the other hand, there can be a definition that would more focus on the linguistic aspects and talks of a speech community as a shared linguistic communication community. Sociolinguistics, in fact, is the study of language used within or among groups of speakers. So, this very general term group can also be used, as an equivalent term for speech communities. However, this apparently very simple term group can also have certain problems, and it may lead towards certain confusion. So for this, we need to determine what are the characteristics of a group. Well, technically speaking, it must have at least two members. less than 2 people would not make a group. An individual cannot be a group. However, there is no upper limit. There can be as many as, needed or wanted or, like to be the members of a group. Secondly, people can group together for one or more reasons. I can, for example, be a part of a group of people who are, for example, teachers. And I use a particular language or kind of language when I'm with them. Well, I also am a part of a bigger social group that is of a regional variety of, for example, Punjabi speakers. So I'm a part of them. So, people on the base of family, vocation, profession, religion, for political reasons, they can be part of different kind of groups of people who use different languages, and they can be members of them at the same time. A group may also be more than its members, for individuals may come and go. So, let's suppose if there are 50 members in a group, 1 or 2 members may leave, 5 members may leave, 2 new members may come in. People keep on coming in and going out, but the group continues to exist. They may also belong to other groups and may or may not even meet face to face. This is very important when we talk to social media communities where, people in the chat rooms, they talk to people virtually and they practically sometimes never meet them. Rather, most of the times they do not meet them. The organization of the group may be tight or loose. Now, there can be a possibility that a group is very tightly structured. Entry into that group is not easily allowed. There are certain linguistic communities in the world where, entry into them is not very easy. There are certain ethnic communities which do not allow the members to come in quickly or easily. But then there can be some groups that are very loosely constructed, as I already gave the example of social media interactions and the groups that are formed there. So most of the times they are very loosely constructed. Another question that arises out of all this, my dear students, is what is individual and group identity? When it comes to speech communities, this becomes a very, very important question. And, individual identity becomes a part of the group identity when it comes to creating or establishing speech communities. Here I'm going to share Leon's 1970s definition of what he calls a real speech community. According to Leon's, all the people who use a given language or dialect make a speech community. However, that really shifts the issue to making the definition of a language or of a dialect also the definition of a speech community. Now, it's not necessary actually that people who belong to one particular language or one particular dialect, they would only be a part of that speech community. So, my dear students, a speech community is no more than some kind of social group whose speech characteristics are of interest and can be described in a coherent manner. Being part of or being a member of that group, people use that particular feature of language in a coherent way.